Okay, we're continuing with the best of the West in art, music, movies, and books by me, Pete Rogers. We're on page 112, the beginning of chapter 3, and this means the third best things in Western civilization. So here's a quote by Goethe, the great German, like the Shakespeare equivalent for Germany. He said, "Of all peoples, the ancient Greeks had the best vision for the dream of what life can be." And everybody who was educated knew that the greatest high points in mankind ever were the ancient Greeks and the Italian Renaissance, up to that point. Now we'd add the Belle Epoque, the 1800s. Okay, here's a quote from Daniel Robinson, philosophy professor from thegreatcourses.com. He says, "The goal of the ancient Greeks was personal perfection, not to control other people. Whereas in most countries, what you have is a tyrant dictator who just wants to control everybody. And he doesn't care at all about creativity, innovation, self-development, any of that stuff. They just want control. That's the way most places are since the beginning of time. They basically say, do as I say or I'll kick your butt." Okay. Other philosophic schools. Okay, that's what we talked about. All right, so now we're going to give a quote from Allan Bloom from the Closing of the American Mind book. He says, he's talking about multiculturalism and the way college students are educated. And he says, "But if these students were really to learn something of the minds of any of these non-Western cultures, which they do not, they would find that each and every one of these cultures is ethnocentric." So what I'm basically saying is that racism is bullshit. Racism is a lie. Racism is a gaslighting communist trick that was used to destroy the Western Christian man and turn everyone against him. Okay? So they basically say, he's racist, therefore we have to destroy his countries and destroy his culture. Meanwhile, they tell everyone else, celebrate your culture, whatever it is. This month is Pacific Islander month. This month is, transsexual month. This month is whatever. But never is the month white Christian man's month, okay? Because he needs to be destroyed. So they try to turn everyone against him, called the Coalition of the Fringes, because that's the only way you can destroy freedom and civilization in the world. Because it was a white Christian man who brought it to the United States, 1776, with the Declaration of Independence and later the Constitution. Okay, so that's why everything is being turned against them. And, as Ann Coulter has said, if the West is so racist, why do all the minorities want to come to it? Because they know it's the best. It had generated the most prosperity, the best food supply, the best institutions traditionally when they were Christians. Now that they're being made atheists, everything is going down in the tubes. And so what Allan Bloom is saying, he's a professor of the humanities at the University of Chicago, he's saying is all cultures say that they're the best. Okay? But the West can objectively defend that statement. They're not just saying it, based on their artistic achievement, their literature, their art, their architecture, and their scientific inventions. Okay. He says all cultures will tell their children that you are the best and your place is the best. And all of them think their way is the best way and that all others are inferior. Everybody grows up seeing their parents that look pretty much like them, and they think that that's what makes them happy, the memory of their childhood, and so they always think that that's the best. Okay? All of them think their way is the best and that others are inferior. Only in the Western nations, in other words, those influenced by Greek philosophy, is there some willingness to doubt the identification of the good with one's own way. One should conclude from the study of Western cultures that not only to prefer one's own way, but to believe it to be the best, superior to all others, is primary, even natural. Exactly the opposite of what is intended by requiring students to study these cultures. The reason for non-Western closedness or ethnocentrism is clear. Men must love and be loyal to their families and their peoples in order to preserve them. Only if they think their own things are good can they rest content with them. A father must prefer his child to other children, a citizen his country to other countries, and that is why there are myths to justify these attachments. So that's Allan Bloom from the Closing of the American Lines. So I would say, yeah, every culture thinks its own culture is the best. But I would say on top of that, though, the West is the only culture that has the objective achievements to say that it is the best in the production of literature. It is the best in the production of painting. It is the best in the production of sculpture. It is the best in the production of freedom. It is the best in the production of prosperity. It is the best in the production of scientific inventions. It is the best in the production of music. These are all true statements. They're objective fact. Anybody can look it up. Over 99% of good painting comes from white Christian men. Okay? No one else paints. Women typically had 10 babies. They didn't have any time to paint. And other cultures don't care about painting. That's just a fact. And they don't care much about sculpture or architecture or any of these other beautiful things. Okay, here's a quote by Arthur Koestler. Some of the greatest discoveries consist mainly in the clearing away of psychological roadblocks which obstruct the approach to reality, which is why post factum they appear so obvious. Yeah, it took balls, guts, courage, and brains to overcome the conformity of the past, and that's not easy to do. That's why only great men do it. If it seems so easy, why did it take a great man to do it? Okay, let's see here. Peasants led by Pericles built the perfectly proportioned Parthenon. Peasants led by the love of God in the Middle Ages built the Gothic cathedrals. Peasants with poor leadership are just a vulgar mob. So the view of the society, its personality, is really important. It determines what happens. Daniel Robinson, another quote. The ancient Greeks believed that harmonious music was harmonious for the soul and bad music was bad for the soul. And you hear it's just about the same thing from John Ruskin, sort of the Puritan English art critic in the 1800s. He says, music when healthy is the teacher of perfect order, and when depraved is the teacher of perfect disorder. Yeah, you can see that, you know. People listen to beat music. Beat music makes people very stupid and vulgar, so you don't want to listen to that stuff. And I realize a lot of people don't know that, including a lot of my friends, and that's why I think they're not developing themselves as well as they should. Okay, one last quote. I'll do one last quote and then we'll call it for today. This one is by Bertrand Russell. He's a philosopher. He's an atheist. He's very anti-Christian. But he's very smart, too. He's a brilliant guy. So here's what he had to say. He's also a rich aristocrat who commits adultery with a bunch of different women. He says, Johann Fichte, the German philosopher of the 1800s, he laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will. The purpose of these public school education in the United States based on the Prussian system was to destroy free will, so that after the pupils have left school, they should be incapable through the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than their schoolmasters would have wished. What had happened was the Germans, like the Prussians, got their butts kicked by Napoleon at Jena, like in 1806. So they decided they had to retrain their young men to make them more conformist and obedient so that they would be better soldiers. Okay? And then the purpose of taking the Prussian system into the American school system was to train men to be conformist factory workers, to just shut up and do as they were told and to not think. Okay? That's what public schools are designed to do. You put all your stuff down, the bell rings, you go to the next room and you shut up and you do as you're told. They don't teach you to think, to analyze. No. Okay? And here Bertrand Russell continues. After this education, they will be convinced that snow is black. Snow is black. Children will be, as in Plato's Republic, taken from their mothers and reared by professional nurses. Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital difference between the rulers and the ruled will have increased until they become almost a different species. Yeah. So basically, the rich people, the smart people, they'll send their kids to a private school where the children learn debate. They learn all these skills to enjoy reading and to educate themselves on their own. And then meanwhile, all the public school kids will be forced to work with computerized learning and told they must conform to whatever the expert says. No debate, no analysis, no thought, just conformist obedience. Okay, and that's his impact of science on society. And he talked about how the rulers will make themselves superior to the others who will be declared inferior for multiple reasons. They're going to eat healthier food. They're going to have a better education. They're going to have better water, not all the crap with fluoride and aluminum in it. Anyways, we'll stop right there. Hope you found that helpful.